Welcome to Tanya in Real Life. We're up to chapter 14. So a guy by the name of John came to a job interview, and the job was as a cook in a small little restaurant in the corner of the town. And he understood that this restaurant had maximum 50, 60 clients per, the whole stretch of the evening. And he felt capable of taking on that job. As he sat through the interview, he was asked, if he can prepare a sample part of the interview process. Could you do a sample main dish in about, now on the spot? And he said, sure. And they said, how long do you think it would take? He said, about an hour, maybe a little bit more. And so then they give him a tour of the kitchen, and he's startled to see these massive pots and huge, gigantic pans and ovens. And it looked like a huge operation, and he couldn't figure it out. Like, this is a small restaurant. Why is there so many, Turns out that this little restaurant also services 5 different wedding halls and 10 different schools, along with 3 other branches of this restaurant around town. Overall, maybe 2,000 portions every single night. So could he still make dinner, a main dish for dinner in about an hour? Absolutely not. He couldn't, right? The job that he thought it was and the job that it actually was were 2 completely different things. And why am I thinking of this little incident that I read somewhere is because before we learned about a Beinoni, we may have thought that to be a Beinoni is pretty simple, pretty easy, and that it naturally, by default, describes who we are, right? Because a Beinoni, prior to Tanya, we thought a Beinoni is an average person, sometimes does mitzvahs, sometimes does avera, sometimes has successes, sometimes has failures, sometimes chooses what's right, and sometimes chooses what's wrong. Sometimes he's aligned with Hashem's will, sometimes he's not. So that's what we thought a Beinoni was, but that's not the Beinoni of the Tanya. The Beinoni of the Tanya has a whole different job description, entirely different story. The Beinoni of the Tanya is someone who never ever diverts from Hashem's will, not even in thought, not even in entertaining a thought that diverts or digresses or ignores, and certainly that contradicts Hashem's will. Now, a Beinoni is and does get distracted and pulled away and pushed by that inner drive of distraction and delusion, otherwise known as the Yetzer Hara. A Beinoni does have a nefesh habahamis with natural human tendencies and weaknesses and even compulsions, right? We talked about that at length in chapter 1. That a Beinoni always has that, but a Beinoni stays strong in his commitment and says, I will never, ever divert from Hashem's will. I am going to stay attached to Hashem at all times, in all places, here and now included. So that's an entirely different job description. And to be a Beinoni, according to the Tanya, is really a very elevated, uplifted, energized, focused, meaningful, purposeful life, which makes the opening words of chapter 14 a very big surprise. And that's why I wanted to read them inside. Okay, here let's read them. It's on the bottom. It's actually on the top of the page, on the notes. V'hinei, or it's the first opening lines of the chapter in Tanya. V'hinei midas haBeinoni hi midas kol adam v'achareha kol adam yimshech. The way of a Beinoni, the midah of a Beinoni, the behavior. Usually midah is translated as behavior, or tendency, or trait, or personality. The behavior of a Beinoni is possible for every person, and every person should strive for this behavior, for this way, for the midah of the Beinoni. Shekal adam yachal liyas Beinoni b'chol eis u'b'chol shah. Every person could be a Beinoni within every time and every hour. So how do we make sense of these words? What do you mean I can be a Beinoni? I remember even growing up, the Beinoni was like halavaya Beinoni. Like, of course, nobody's going to be a Beinoni. It was kind of taken for granted that a Beinoni is an elevated person that, is beyond the regular, ordinary person amongst us. But really, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya right here is saying everyone could be a Beinoni. Not everyone, not only that we could, but this is something we want to be striving for every day, in every moment, every hour, every situation. So in understanding these words and this message, this guidance, the key word here is midas habeinoni, not madregas habeinoni. See, madregas habeinoni means the level. If the Baal Tanya would use the word level, madregas habeinoni, that would mean that it's possible to reach that place where we kind of park there, to reach that place and settle there and be established firmly, as if we have arrived, quote unquote, like as if we reached that spot and now we're going to be that way for the rest of our lives, permanently set in the definition of a Beinoni. But we may not be that perfect. We may never reach the madrega of a Beinoni in the sense where madrega implies that we arrived, we got there, we landed on that plateau or on the top of that mountain. That's not what we're after over here. What the Baal Tanya is telling us that we could do is the midah of the Beinoni, the characteristic, the way, the attitude, the mindset, the behavior to do the Beinoni way. That is possible, and that is possible anytime, any place, no matter what. We can always pull up that behavior, that style. The midah of the Beinoni is possible for every single one of us. We can reach for the qualities of a Beinoni. We can follow that script. And that's something that we could do at any time, any hour. And I think it's Hashgacha Pratis that this is, I really did want to do the next 2 chapters, and we will do them, Be'ezras Hashem, for sure. But, being that today is our last learning session for before the summer, I really feel if you take away one thought and one practical tool, a guidance that you want, light, a little light to come along with you through the summer, let it be this. That possibility of, in this moment, I could show up as a Beinoni. I could show up in alignment with the truth about Hashem and the truth about my own self, my own value, my own identity. Because we all know the world is literally rocking. The world is shaking with all kinds of earth-shattering events, spiritual, political, psychological, physical. It is super easy to get swept away, up and away into a space of otherness, into a space where otherness has power, where politicians and doctors and public policy and social media and government rules and regulations, it feels as if they have all the power in the world to literally unsettle our lives and threaten our well-being and make us or break us. And it's so easy. That's literally what it seems like in the world right now. And in a certain sense, it almost seems as if it is happening that way. The truth is that only Hashem is running the world, including every single detail. Every single detail is orchestrated and directed and guided and literally managed personally by none other than Hashem himself. And it's all for a purpose that's in our best interest. It's all part of the process of walking into Geula. That's what's happening. And we wish it would happen smoother. We wish it would happen without this feeling of being unsettled. At the same time, the fact that it's unsettled doesn't chas v'shalom mean that the otherness has power. It's just Hashem wants us to hold on stronger. Hashem is asking us, we need to, because if we don't hold on stronger, we're lost. We have to hold on stronger. We have to hold on tighter. We have to be more attached than ever before, more attached to the truth. The story that comes to my mind, which I've shared here before, but it's always a good story to remember, is the story of Reb Meir of Premishlan, who was walking, he used to walk every day to the mikvah, which was on the top of a very slippery road in the winter. And the townspeople, who were very simple people, would always marvel at the ability of the tzaddik to be able to walk on that path and never fall and never slip and never get hurt, despite the treacherous weather that persisted for months on end in Poland, I think it was, or Russia. One time, 2 scoffers came to town And it bothered them that everybody felt this sense of reverence for the tzaddik, Reb Meir Lepremeshlan. And they said, what's going on? You know, what's the big deal? One example that people said, look, there goes Reb Meir, right? And they were like, what's the big deal? We can do it too. Watch us. And they put on their strong shoes and their coats and they set onto that path. And of course, within seconds, their screams pierced the air. They slipped, they fell, they bruised themselves. And the first thing they did when they came to themselves is they went over to Reb Meir and they said, how could it be you with your old, you're unfit, you're wearing shmata shoes, you know, tzekrachana shoes that barely are held together by the shoestrings, and us, and you just walked with such agility, you made it seem easy. Whereas us, we're fit, we exercise, we're professional climbers, we're athletic, we have good, strong, solid shoes, and we fell and you didn't. And he said, as man ist zugebunden oben, fällt man nicht unten. If we're connected above, when you're connected above, you don't fall below. And to me, this is a really strong guidance. The more we're connected above, the less we will fall below. And now with the world is such a slippery place, such turbulence, so many pitfalls, such treacherous weather spiritually, emotionally, and literally psychologically, that we really need more than ever to be holding on to the truth. And how we do that is by learning about Hashem, by thinking about Hashem, by davening every day with focus and intention, and doing all the work that we've been talking about all this time. And most importantly, like we learned last week, to remember that literally every moment in our lives is a choice. Every moment we have that choice. Am I going to give credence and power to otherness, or am I going to give credence and power to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to Hashem himself? And the Baal Tanya is encouraging us to recognize that we have it in us to be that Beinoni and make the choice to be aligned with Hashem. We may never be the madrega of a Beinoni. We may never attain a state of being where we are always going to make that choice. But here and now, we could do the Beinoni behavior. We could show up with our neshama shining forth in our behavior, in our words, and even in our thoughts. We can be that person who says, I will not contradict or deny or even ignore Hashem's truth, Hashem's absolute kingship in my life. And it's a choice that we need to make all the time, every day, but we can do it. We can do it. So let's be brave. Let's be strong. Let's be conscious. Let's not fall asleep at the wheel, because it's a stormy road. We cannot afford to fall asleep at the wheel. No matter what happens or what shakes us, let's keep coming back to this truth and to the choice, the conscious choice of Hashem's kingship. Now, in this chapter, we're going to learn another avenue, another strategy for making that choice. All that we've been learning in the previous chapters definitely have all been leading up to this. But in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, tells us another big idea, which we will take as a double strategy. So we're going to do it first in the text. I put out the whole text in the notes. It's a couple of lines, and then we'll bring about it. Okay, so here goes the text. How could it be? How does a Beinoni make that choice, right? How does a Beinoni make that choice to show up with the neshama shining forth? And he says like this, Ki ha-Beinoni einay ma'es bara, shezehu davar hamasur lalev, because a Beinoni does not hate evil. Where evil means, right, that Beinoni does not hate things that contradict or deny Hashem's truth. For this is a matter of the heart. Emotions are a matter of the heart, and therefore beyond the Beinoni's control. V'lo kala itim shavos, and not all times are equal. Sometimes, such as during davening or moments of clarity, a Beinoni has more developed emotions towards Hashem and towards the behaviors and facts that conceal Hashem. But other times, a Beinoni has less. So he says, how could a Beinoni show up as a Beinoni? How could we show up as a Beinoni? Because we don't have to change our emotions. We don't even have to look at our emotions. We don't have to worry about our emotions. What we do need to do is Sur meira va'aseh tov. Turn away from evil and do good. Dahainu, meaning b'poel mamish, in actual and practical action, in actual practice, b'maaseh dibur u'machshava, with our action, with our words, and with our thoughts. Why? Because shabahem ha'bachira, in these things, in the matters of thought, speech, and action, we have a choice. We do have a choice. It feels like we don't, but we do have a choice. Behaviors are a matter of choice. And behaviors includes thought. Conscious thought is also a matter of choice. And therefore, because it's a matter of choice, every mamish. Because it's a matter of choice, it's possible. In fact, every person has the absolute freedom to act, speak, and think, even in ways that are contrary to the desire of his heart, and even the complete opposite. Because even at the same time, even while a person's heart is craving and desiring a physical desire, whether it's something that's permitted according to halacha, obviously, or something that's forbidden, something that Torah says no to, whether it's something that's allowed to do, a permissible action or behavior, or an avera chas v'shalom, yachol lehizgaber ulhasich daita mimena legamri ba'amra. Okay, a person could overcome this desire and divert his attention from it completely. How? Ba'amrai lalibai. A person could tell his heart. We need to tell our hearts, and these are such powerful words. Ba'amrai lalibai. We will tell our hearts. Eineni reitze liyos rasha afilu shah achas. I don't want to be a Russia, even for 1 minute. Even for 1 minute, I don't want to be a Russia. The Baal Tanya continues. I don't think I included this, but let me just read another line. I don't want to be separate or divided or anything to come in between me and Hashem, chas v'shalom, whatsoever. Because it says that sins separate us. They put space. They put curtains, obstacles between us and Hashem. I want to cleave to Hashem with my whole heart and soul. I want to invest my heart and soul with Hashem's garments, with Torah and mitzvah. I want my speech and my action and my mind to be completely invested and imbued with Hashem himself through his Torah and the mitzvahs. And where does this come from? Where do we get the strength to tell this to our hearts? Me'ava mesuteres shebelibay laHashem, from the hidden love to Hashem in our hearts, which we will be talking about in Mirat Hashem the next time we get together. Let's backtrack a little bit and let's review what we just said. What is the Baal Tanya telling us? You know, sometimes I'm sure I said this before. When I was little, if my mother told me to do something or my father told me to do something and I said, I don't want to, my mother would say, I don't need you to want to. I just need you to do it, right? I just need you to do it. I don't need you to want to. The Baal Tanya is reminding us that we don't have to hate otherness. We don't have to despise anything that conceals or denies or ignores Hashem's presence. We just have to disengage from it. We just have to not act on it, disengage, turn away from that, and instead act on how, not just instead, but by, how do we turn away from otherness? How do we turn away from Hashem's concealment? By engaging with Hashem, by cleaving to Hashem, by in clothing ourselves, if we can use that expression that the Baal Tanya uses, literally attaching ourselves in our minds, in our hearts, in our behavior with Torah and mitzvahs, with thoughts about Hashem and with actions of Torah and mitzvahs. Now, this sounds so simple, but it's a very, very, it's a deep concept, because What's our relationship with our emotions? What are our emotions in relation to us? What are they? I used to think of my emotions as myself. That's me. Me and my emotions always used to be one thing. I am sad. I am happy. I am satisfied. It wouldn't be I feel satisfied. It'd be I am, right? If I feel it, then I am. If I go against how I feel, then I'm not being true to myself. And if I'm not, and I want to be true to myself, so I must follow what I feel. I must act on how I feel because I want to be true to myself. And this is a concept that is so deeply ingrained in us in American society, in our culture, and even in our Jewish community, right? Follow your heart, be true to yourself. If I feel it, if I feel a desire for something and I'm not going to do it, I'm going to be denying my truth, or I'm going to be denying the facts of how I feel. That's one way of looking at our relationship with our emotions, that our emotions are, by that perspective, our emotions are compulsions. Because how could you deny or contradict something that's real for you? If it's real for you, then that's your reality and that's what you need to act on. You can't move out of it. This is your reality, and these are the parameters of your reality, and you have to be honest, and you have to be limited by it. But people who say that don't use the word limited, but they say you have to be honest and you have to be real with yourself and true to yourself. And obviously, if we do that, then we will be slaves to ferocious monsters. Because if I am limited by what I feel, and I'm a sensitive person and I feel all kinds of very intense emotions, then that's a very severe limitation upon myself. So what's that balance between taking our emotions too seriously and ignoring our emotions? What is the Baal Tanya telling us? What's a healthy relationship with our emotions? And I think the key words here, how he says, you don't have to hate it. You don't have to hate it. What does it mean you don't have to hate it? It means almost like your emotions are not what matters always. Don't be so obsessed with those emotions. Don't even think about it. Don't try to change it. Don't work with it. Let it be. You focus on your behavior. And what about your emotions? Does that mean totally ignore your heart? No, because you have to have a conversation with your heart. You have to be able to have an emotion that's bigger than all the emotions. I'm going to slow down for a second. Before we could talk about how we could look at our human emotions in a healthy way, in a balanced way, in a Tanya way, we first need to know who we are, period, right? The Baal Tanya, I think one of the biggest gifts that we get in Tanya and the tools that we constantly, the one thing is Perek Beis. That's what makes us spiritually rich. We're billionaires because we have a chelek elaka mimal mamash, because the nefesh hashenis b'Yisrael, because our neshama, that true self, that part, that deepest self of who we are is an actual part of Hashem. That's our deepest self-definition. And that's our deepest desire and our deepest identity, our deepest value. And that's always, always, always one with Hashem, inseparably one with Hashem. It's our true self. That's myself that has infinite, untouchable, unchangeable value. That's myself that's unstoppable, that's invincible, that's courageous. That's ourself that's beautiful, that's gorgeous, even before we do anything, even if we're overweight or pimply on our skin or wrinkled, right? We're always gorgeous because that is who we are. That's our core. That's what makes us, that's our truest self. And will never, ever be defined by anything or by anyone, by any circumstances, situations, or conditions, because it is unchangeable. It's by definition, it's unchangeable. It's not open to being defined. It's already defined. It's already perfect. It's already beautiful. It's already complete. Its light can never be dimmed. And it also can never be made bigger. It just is an actual part of Hashem. And that's who we are. Now, we also have another wannabe king inside of ourselves that is rooted in, like what we said, klipa and sitra achra. It's otherness. Otherness meaning it's other to Hashem. It conceals, contradicts, ignores Hashem's truth. It's not naturally aware of Hashem. It's not even naturally aware of our deeper self. Plus, we have a Yetzer Hara that pulls us towards that king and says, this is the real you. That human dimension is your primary self. Your nefesh elikis, your neshama, part of Hashem. It's a nice bonus. It's a cherry on top. It's a nice, thing to remember, to meditate about. It's abstract. It's hayich. It's lofty. It's something that, you have to reach for. But the real you is your human self. You're nothing but a human being limited by and locked into your humanness. So just get real and stop, trying to elevate yourself to any other place. Now, all our emotions are real. All our human emotions are real. It's true. We cannot escape being human. Our human experience is very, very real. It's part of how we're wired. We learned this in chapter 1 of Tanya. It's the first thing the Baal Tanya told us when we walked into the room of the Baal Tanya, and we said, what are we doing? What's the first thing we need to know? And our journey towards being aligned with Hashem, to being spiritually, emotionally healthy. What's the first thing we need to know? The Baal Tanya says, first, look at your labels, right? First, think about who you are. And part of that, in that same chapter, in that same conversation, the Baal Tanya tells us, know that you have all these weaknesses, the human fragilities, the frail, the faultiness, the possibility to abuse and be abused, to hurt and be hurt, to be distracted and to distract others, all that stuff, to be angry, to resentful, to be despaired, to be empty-headed, all of that is part of how we are wired. We'll naturally have resentments, fears, insecurities, self-pity. All of that it's our real you will always be human. This is part of our human experience. And as part of our human experience, we have a capacity for otherness. And having that capacity and that tendency and even that compulsion means we will have that pull towards acting as if we don't have an awesome self, as if we chas v'shalom do not have that neshama pulsating inside our hearts. We'll be pulled to forget about Hashem, chas v'shalom, to deny Hashem, to ignore his truth, to be completely distracted from the truth, even though we hold that truth so precious. Even though we hold that truth so, so, so dear to our hearts, we could be distracted from it. We really could. And we could, chas v'shalom, we could ignore Hashem's truth. We could ignore and be distracted from Hashem's power, Hashem's compassion, Hashem's presence, Hashem's love, Hashem's empowerment of us, and Hashem's presence within us. And now we're learning in chapter 14 that it is entirely possible, despite all of this, to show up as a Beinoni, to show up to this moment, to each moment, but even to this moment, as a Beinoni, aware of Hashem, consciously aligned with Hashem's will, as if that doesn't happen. How do we do that? How can we do this? As if I don't have the tendency to ignore. How could I be aligned with Hashem if I have all those emotions and tendencies that even feel like compulsions? And the Baal Tanya says, don't worry about your emotions. Don't even try to change your emotions. Just change your behavior. Focus all your attention on your behavior. Your choices are a full-time job. Don't be distracted from it. So you don't have to hate otherness. Just don't do otherness. You don't have to hate the klipa. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. And this is huge because it gives us permission to separate ourselves from our emotions. Because if it's possible, if my emotions don't matter that much, then I don't have to take it that seriously. That means it's not really me. So usually when I feel happy, I don't say I feel happy. I say I am happy. Why? Because I look at my emotions as one with me. I don't separate myself from my emotions. But to be a healthy, psychologically healthy, emotionally healthy, and certainly spiritually healthy, we need to know that we have a self that's deeper and bigger than our emotions. Our self is not our emotions. Yes, our emotions are part of our real experience, but they're not our self. And so we have that permission and the freedom to not act on those emotions, because if you defy your emotions or your desire, you're not being not true to yourself. You're just being true to a deeper part of yourself. You have a deeper part of yourself that you're choosing to be aligned with. And that part of you is bigger than your emotion that's temporary in this moment, or that's long-term, but that's not aligned with your deeper self. So our emotions and tendencies and desires are not our true self. As much as they feel like they are, they're real, but they're not my reality. They're my experience, but they're not my definition. They might be aligned with my true self, but they might not be. And when a thought pops into my head, it might be true, but it might not be. It might be worth thinking about, but it might not be worth thinking about. Knowing that it's not me, when the Baal Tanya says, it's okay. You could still do the right thing. Even if you feel very, very wrong, you could still do the right thing. That's wow. That's very profound. You mean I don't have to actually obey every emotion? Baal Tanya says, no, you don't, because it's not you. The unspoken message here is it's not you. The message that we've been hearing in the previous chapters, in the earliest chapters, when the Baal Tanya was separating, there's an essential self, then there's emotions, and there's intellect, and then there's behavior. Remember, we separated that. So we're leaning into that truth as we remind ourselves now that we don't have to worry if our emotions are not on board. Our first order of business is to get our behavior aligned with Hashem. Our emotions are simple energies that pass through us. That's our relationship with our emotions. They're energies. They're going to pass. They're here today. They're gone whenever they will be gone. They will be gone. Okay. They feel like our true self. They're not our true self. And the same thing is with our thoughts. The thoughts that pop into our heads feel like reality, feel like truths, that feel like facts, but they're simple ideas that pass through our minds, like a train going through a train station, or a cloud that passes overhead, or a bird that flies overhead. We don't have to let that bird make a nest in our ear. We don't have to ride every train that passes through the station, right? They feel like part of our identity, but they're not. And that's the key to showing up in this moment as a Beinoni. It's if we can let our commitment to Hashem be bigger and stronger than this moment emotion or compulsion. Our attachment to Hashem, our desire to be one with Hashem, to cleave to Hashem, is bigger than my desire for that piece of cake. Yeah, I want that cake, but I want my attachment with Hashem more than I want that piece of cake. Yeah, I want to entertain that thought of resentment, of despair, of self-pity, but I want my attachment with Hashem even more than I want to obey my desires. So just to backtrack on that, that visual, if I see a piece of cake, I used to think, it's not a mitzvah to eat it, but if I feel like eating it, my mind says I should have it, then I'm going to have it, right? If that's what if I want it, I should have it. And if my desire is all that matters in the moment, I will just do that. And that's why, by the way, I think many diets don't have that sustainability, because how long could you deprive yourself? For how long could you ignore and push away and deprive yourself of your emotions? You can't. What the Baal Tanya is saying is discover a deeper emotion inside of yourself. Yeah, you want the cake, but you want something more than you want the cake. Tap into that part of you. Okay. I want attachment with Hashem more than I want that. I don't have to hate the cake. I actually want the cake. I like it, but I want Hashem more. And let's replace the cake is almost easy because it's a behavior. I think that the Baal Tanya, if you notice, whenever the Baal Tanya, including in this chapter, but I think I've noticed it more than once in this chapter, but very often when the Baal Tanya is talking about the power of choice and our ability to choose our conscious behavior, even though the Baal Tanya includes conscious thought as a behavior, the order is always action, then speech, and then thought, because thought is the most difficult to control because it's the most abstract. It's the most intimately connected with ourself. Our actions, it's easier to separate ourselves from our action. They don't express our deepest self. Our words express more of our deeper self than our than our thoughts. Our thoughts are very intimate with ourselves. They're very private. They're we're very, very connected to our thoughts. They express ourselves to ourselves. Our thoughts are very, very one. We're very one with our thoughts. But the Baal Tanya says, even our thoughts, we're not one with. So let's say I want to think about this thought popped into my head. This thought about another person pops into my mind, and I'm leaning towards pondering that evil that she perpetrated or he perpetrated, that wrongdoing, that mistake, that obnoxiousness. Okay. I'm leaning towards resentment, towards thoughts of resentment, or I'm leaning towards self-pity. I'm leaning towards thoughts of despair, of worthlessness, of shame, and of guilt, of anything that's toxic towards myself or another person. I'm leaning towards those thoughts. Or let's say another example of a behavior that's maybe, more common, maybe many of us can relate to, is my hand is about to mindlessly click on a website and I'm going to read it. And I know it's not spiritually productive, to say the least, for me to be reading or watching whatever is on this particular website or in this particular video that somebody forwarded to me. What's going to get me to stop? What's going to get us to stop engaging in that thought, riding on that train, doing that behavior? What's going to get me to stop? Only one thing. Our desire for Hashem needs to be bigger than our desire for our desires. Or our attachment to Hashem needs to be bigger than our attachment to our desires. Or to put it this way is, we need to realize that our desire for Hashem is bigger. We need to come to that place. And the way we come to this place is through all the work we've been discussing in the previous chapters, thinking about Hashem, learning about ourselves, davening every day, consciously absorbing the magnitude of Hashem's awesomeness, the magnitude of the awesomeness of his truth in our lives, consciously absorbing it, letting it be real for ourselves. When we do that, we come to realize that we value our attachment with Hashem more than we value our attachment with a piece of cake, or more than we value our attachment to our moods, to our tendencies, to our habits, to our compulsions, to that thought. Yeah, I want to go on that train. It's interesting, but you know what? More than that, I want to be one with Hashem. I want to experience and exult and delight in that oneness. This train, I want to ride on it, but it's going to take me away from my awareness of Hashem. And I don't want to move away from my awareness of Hashem. So I'm not going to go on it. If we can't do that, if we feel limited by our emotions and by our desires, we will be slaves to literally ferocious masters. Before I said monsters, but I'll say monstrous masters, okay? Very, very strong, powerful masters. We're slaves to masters if we can't liberate ourselves from our desires, our habits, our tendencies. When they feel like compulsions, and they often do, we need to still remember they're not our boss. They're not our true self. There's a true self that is bigger than that. I know that for myself, if I would follow every thought that pops into my mind, I would be a nut job, to be honest, right? And then if I don't hear my emotions at all, if I totally distract myself from my emotions and I always make my mind noisy, even with Torah, even with shiurim, even with Torah classes, if I never pay attention to what I'm thinking and to how I'm feeling, if I never do that at all, that would also be completely unhealthy, because then I wouldn't be able to talk to my heart. I wouldn't have a conversation with our heart. And in the next chapter, the Baal Tanya describes the value of service with Hashem, which really, I'm going to put it out here for 1 minute while we can, because it's such an important thing to hold on to as we struggle. And it is a struggle to show up in every moment as a Beinoni and to make that choice. We need to remember, and it's so helpful to know, that every time we make that choice, that is a tremendous service of Hashem. That is the reason we are here in this world. So the fact that I am pulled is not because I am weak. It's not because I am not good enough. It's not because I didn't work hard enough in my life. It's not because I'm a failure. or because I didn't reach a level of perfection, quote unquote. It's not because of any of that. It's because Hashem designed me to, and Hashem wants me to be an eved, an oved Hashem, to be one who serves Hashem. And that service is making the choice. And I could only make the choice if I can only say yes to Hashem if I have the leaning and the tendency and even the compulsion to say no. I might, sorry, my yes is only yes when I have the possibility of saying no. You know, even think about relationships with people. If a person always says yes to you and they're not allowed to say no, then they're not giving you a gift when they say yes. They're just doing their regular thing. It's not a new gift. But if they could say no, and they have full permission by all understandings to say no, and then they say yes, that is a gift every single time they say yes. And Hashem wanted our yes to be a gift every single time, to bring new light into the world, to bring a new level of Geula, a new step, a new part of Geula. Every single time we say yes to Hashem, yes to Hashem's power, by definition, we're saying no to the power of otherness, no to the power of politics, no to the power of social media. Yes to the power of Hashem. Every single time we say yes, we're bringing a whole new light into the world. And that's what we are here for. So, and we wouldn't be able to, that yes would not have the value if we didn't have the power to say no. So, and the Baal Tanya also talks about that a little bit. I mean, he hints to the value and the need for emotion, for us hearing our emotions and for not ignoring them. He says, right? A person needs to be able to talk to your heart. Some people say, well, what do you mean talk to my heart? What does that look like? Who's talking to who? What do you mean talk to my heart? How do I talk to my heart? Right? But the Baal Tanya says it like, you know, ba'amrei aliba. You're supposed to be able to have a conversation with your heart. And he even gives us the words, a sample language, a sample conversation of what you want to tell your heart. Remind your heart, yeah, I know you want to do that thing. I know you, whatever that thing is, and we all have that thing, and we have many things, right? I know you want to do that thing. I know you want to think that thought. I know you want to go down that road, take that train. I know you want to do that, but remember, we don't want to be a Russia even for 1 minute. We don't want to conceal or deny or contradict or ignore Hashem's presence at all. So we're not going on that train. So we have to get our heart on board. It's not about ignoring our emotions. It's about talking to our emotions, getting our emotions on board. Okay, let's open up to discussion and then we'll summarize. Okay, let me repeat the question for the recording. Aside from overcoming undesired thoughts and emotions, what is the value of these undesired thoughts and emotions? And to me, that is, you know, I know that when we have these thoughts or emotions, that is what causes us to look inside and discover that we have something bigger and deeper than that. If we're never challenged with other thoughts, it's basically what gives us the exercise. You know, there's a thing of resistance bands, right? In exercise today, a lot of people use these resistance bands to do stretching, right? If you have a resistance band, that's going to cause you to push harder. And by pushing harder, you get stronger. Spiritually, the resistance is the otherness, our tendency to otherness. Without the otherness, we would never have to search for our truth, and we would never discover that truth to the depth that we have to discover it. And you've been doing this work for a while, so maybe I think you'll be able to relate to this. You know, there's always, because Hashem is infinite, and the truth of Hashem's awesomeness is so infinite, and the truth of our neshama is infinite. There's always a new layer of insight. There's always a new layer of, I'm going to say, resistance There's always a new layer of growth. There's always more room to grow. But as we grow, as we face a new subtlety in the lie that we believe about ourselves or about other powers or in attributing power to other people, we develop a nuance, a new insight, there's a new inch in my heart where I didn't realize that I didn't fully attribute all the power to Hashem, but now I do. It's like a whole new level of attributing power to Hashem. But the feelings are not facts. You know, it is a fact that we have feelings. It's important to, you know, it is a fact. Feelings are not facts kind of feels like it's dismissive of they're not facts. And it's important to know that they're not facts, nor are they the truth, but they are our true factual experience. Do you hear the difference? We have to be careful not to be dismissive of our feelings and of our thoughts, because in dismissing them totally and making them seem like they don't exist or that they don't matter, we will lean towards denial, and denial is very, very unhealthy. We wouldn't be able to do the ba'amrai alibai. We wouldn't be able to, if we deny our feelings, we won't be able to have conversations between our deeper self and our experienced self, our hearts. You know, we won't be able to have a conversation with our deeper heart and our conscious heart. And that would be a big loss. And also, if we deny our emotions, then we never have the ability to reach the strength and the depth that we could only reach when we challenge and when we face our challenging darkness. We can't turn on the light. In other words, we have light, but I won't turn on the light if I won't actually use the light if I don't know that it's dark. I can only activate the light. I will only activate the light when there's a space of darkness. So it's so important not to minimize the value of even our negative and unpleasant and messy. I hate the word negative. I'll say our distracting or our emotions that really, you know, keep us away from the truth of Hashem's awesomeness and of our own awesomeness. Wow. I was writing down what you're saying because it's so profound. I'm going to repeat it for the recording. When I am in the emotion, I can't do anything with the emotion. I am engulfed within it and controlled by it. When I am outside of the emotion, that's when I can look at it and make a choice about it. I thank you so much for sharing that. I want to give everybody a little visual that I always use, and I don't remember where I picked this up. So I apologize that I'm not giving credit to where credit is due. I did not make this up, but someone said, oh, look at it from the balcony, you know? And since then, I have this visual of myself, like I'm a self, right? And I kind of like want to take a step back within myself and take a step up and look at my emotions as if from the balcony, you know? And I think that's a lot what you're saying. When I like that the language that you said, when I'm in the emotion, I'm controlled by it. I need to take a step out of it to be able to look at it and make a choice about it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Here's a very, 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 very important, good question. And I would love if people can jump in, because I have some thoughts about it, but I want this to be a conversation. What about when I cannot? So someone's asking, it's very nice to say when I'm in the emotion, I'm engulfed by it, so I need to take a step out. But what about when I'm in it? How do I take that step? I'm switching around your question a little bit. You're saying, what when I can't? What about when I cannot separate myself from the emotion? I want to change the word can't to when it's hard, because I think that's the key here. Sometimes it feels impossible. And I want to say that doesn't mean we can't. It means it's more difficult. And for that, we need something else. So here's just one thing that I could say. If it's an emotion that's like, if it's a physical thing, you know, sometimes doing a physical action, like getting out of your house, splashing your face with cold water, that in itself could break that, negative rush, that cycle. Grounding your feet putting your feet onto the ground and like feeling the sensation, that could break the intensity of an emotion within a moment. But I think what you're talking about is bigger than that. And let's say a hormonal experience where we have a really hard day, where there's like a cloud over your head and it just feels like everything is yucky. Everything is just, and everyone has different experiences of that. For some people, it's worthlessness. For some people, it's resentment. For some people, it's everybody's getting on my nerves. Nothing's going right. We all have our own experience of what that emotion looks like. But what about when I can't get out of that? So I really believe that there's no such thing as I can't. There is a thing of it's hard. And there is a thing of we need, if this is a long-term thing, a person will need outside help. You cannot do this every single day. Sometimes there's biologically, there's whether it's medication, whether it's vitamins, whether it's a change of diet, acupressure, all kinds of alternative treatments that can get our body to be more regulated so that we don't have to work so hard to regulate our emotions. It's not supposed to be this hard. It's not supposed to feel like you're swimming upstream, really, really working so hard 24/7. If it is, then something's wrong. Either biologically, like a person might need something to help them physically, whether it's vitamins, a change of diet. I know for me, when I'm on sugar, my hormones go crazy, and I'm out of, it's really much, it makes it much harder. It's like it makes the ocean wavy and stormy and more difficult to swim through the path that I want, swim through to the other side. But and everyone has their stuff. Sometimes a person might need medication. Sometimes a person might need a lot of outside support. That's, just that and a hand holding. They're not supposed to be so hard. If you feel like you can't for a long period of time, get help. Get something to help you make it possible. But let's just remember that it is possible. We are supposed to be able to make a choice of our behavior, of our conscious thought. It might be hard at times, but it's always possible. That was really beautiful. I want to just go back for a second and repeat the question, because it was a very, very good question. Is it normal to have times when I feel like I can't do this? Okay. Usually after I feel like I can't do my life, or I can't even do this work, or this work is not helping me, I can't do my life. And we're talking about this work that we're talking about, the Tanya and the book, Your Awesome Self. Usually there's growth afterwards. But during this time, I really feel like I cannot do it. Is that normal? Is that a normal part of the journey? And I just want to say a big, huge yes. Of course, it is going to feel like we cannot do this. And I also have such moments. And I believe if we're honest, we all have those moments when we feel I cannot do my day. I cannot do the challenge. I cannot do this difficult phone call. I cannot have this hard conversation. I cannot face this moment, this hour, this situation. I just can't do it. I can't do my day. I can't do my life. I can't, and I don't want to. And it's in this moment where we all the tools that we want to, that's the work. First of all, I just want to say that I'm so happy to hear that you're recognizing that it's always after, or you said usually after these intense experiences of I can't, there's all of a sudden a huge insight and a huge growth. This is consistent with there's an expression, and it's a scientific fact, a spiritually scientific fact of Yerida Litzerach Aliyah. There's a spiritual principle of that every descent is for the purpose of growth, for the purpose of ascent. There's no descent that is meaningless. meaning to say there's no challenge that we face that doesn't really lead to growth. There's no tears of pain that don't lead to something beautiful coming out of it within your own heart, within your own self. So the fact that you can recognize that you can look back at previous times when you felt really in despair or really like you were hitting a brick wall, and that it was impossible to move forward, and that that Hashem wasn't, the spiritual tools weren't helping you in your life. You could look back at that and say, but then I learned that A, B, or C. So now, I mean, for me, even when I'm in the pits, I know that there's going to be a brighter day. The sun is going to shine again. Even when it feels dark, you trust. And that changes qualitatively the experience of the darkness when you know the sun will shine again. When you can trust that process. Yes, it feels impossible right now, but I know I've been here before. I've come through it. I've come out on the other side, and I've come out with greater insight and greater strength, and maybe in a way that I would have never had if not for that. So it's definitely part of, I think that all of us, if we're honest, we all have moments of struggle. And I'm not even going to call it struggle where we feel, I'm going to say where we really feel like we're hitting a brick wall. This is the dead end. It feels like a dead end. It feels like we got to the end of the road and this is as far as we can go and we're done. And we're going to throw in the towel and this is it. All the work has come to nothing. But then something changes, something shifts. It might be a perspective. It might be an insight that suddenly falls into our head when we experience something. We meet someone, hashgacha pratis, and our eyes are always still open to Hashem's guidance and his leadership and his presence in our life. And something shifts, whatever it might be. And then there's a huge growth. So if you trust that process, and then you look for the sun to rise, you look for the hashgacha pratis, you look for what am I gonna hold on to here? You know, what's gonna make the difference? I just want to add one more thing to this, is that let's try not to use the words I can't, because the more, when it feels like I can't, remind yourself it's hard. There's a very big difference between impossible and hard, because impossible is impossible. It's a dead end. And when we tell ourselves that story, then that story becomes our reality. So let's try to rewrite that story. When you're feeling like it's impossible and you feel like I can't, edit that story in your head. Say, this is really, 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 really hard. 1,000,000 times harder than I would have ever imagined it could be. It's so hard, but hard is a whole different thing than impossible. Do you hear that difference? Thank you so much for sharing that resonates with me. And I want to just refer back to what I was saying before, that because you're saying the more I see the light shining from the darkness, the more I'll trust that the light shines after the darkness. We also need to, on a good day, when the sun is shining brightly, we need to condition ourselves and strengthen our roots. The visual that she said was that when there's a storm, some trees will stay strong, and the trees that don't fall are the ones that have stronger roots. So she says, make stronger roots in your heart. Build a foundation of how you will deal with challenges. How will I go about it? How will I deal how will I deal on a sunny day, on a good day? And that really, like, in other words, if I can see hashgacha pratis in my life today, if I can feel Hashem's love and Hashem's presence and Hashem's protection, if I can wake up in the morning and say my da'ani and absorb the magnitude, take a few seconds to absorb the awesomeness of the gift that I have, the merit, the gift, the preciousness, you know, of being able to carry Hashem's light to this day, and to be carried by Hashem this day. If I look at my, you know, when you say the morning brachas, the morning blessings that we say, you know, thank you Hashem for giving me eyes that I could see, pakeach ivrim, that I can see, that I can think, that my brain works, that my body works, that all these different things, I don't take anything for granted. And we notice Hashem's blessings and we absorb the beauty of it. That all that stuff conditions us so that on a hard day, we trust that we will see the light. Because it's not just, it is true that after a challenge, and when you experience that light after the darkness, the next time you're in a place of darkness, you already trust that you'll see the darkness. But it works the other way too, that when you're in the light, know that there is going to be darkness and strengthen yourself. Now, don't like sometimes when things are good, we sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride of our lives. And we forget to do the work. We forget to hold on tight to Hashem. We forget to daven we don't daven with the same intensity or the same neediness because we're not feeling needy. So we lose a little bit of the energy. We lose the steam. You know, they say desperation is the mother of invention, right? And I say desperation is the mother of connection with Hashem, because when we feel desperate, we hold on so tight. But we want to remember that even on a good day, we want to really connect, like consciously, profoundly connect, plug in, be aware, tune up the volume of Hashem's presence in our lives. You know, pull aside that curtain and see it, touch it, feel it, experience it, so that on a dark day, the roots of our connection and our faith and our trust will be that much stronger. This was such a great question. I'm really grateful to you for bringing it up. Thank you. How do I know what Hashem wants from me in a moment of choice? How do I know which choice is aligned with Hashem's truth and which choice is not? For example, in the piece of cake, how do I know that Hashem does not want me to have that piece of cake? You know, maybe Hashem wants me to have it because it will make me feel happier. And I'll use that happiness I'll bring that happiness to my children, to the people around me. I'll be a nicer person after I have a piece of cake. So for me personally, I could tell you that with the piece of cake, it's very clear, although there's a part of my brain that doesn't want to believe it and does not believe it, but cake is not good for me. So it's impossible that Hashem would want me to have it, although maybe everything in moderation. I do have a lot of uncertainty about it too, because even though I should be so clear about it, I'm not 100% clear about it. So I want to just elaborate on this question. Okay, so first of all, somebody shared, do I push myself, for example, to daven, or when I'm really, really, really tired, or do I go to sleep and maybe that sleep is healing and maybe it's more the right thing? Or someone is sharing, if I'm healing from very severe childhood trauma, and part of that was that I had no choices and I felt worthless and maybe objectified in that position of having no choices. Maybe just the fact that I'm choosing a piece of cake is actually healing and productive and meaningful. And I think that both of these questions really, it's so personal. It's so personal. And that's why there's no answer that's across the board. And in Yiddishkeit, much of our day-to-day behavior boils down to, it's not what you do, it's how you do it or why you're doing it. In other words, it's not about eating cake, okay? For some people, eating cake is a mitzvah. And for some people, eating cake is not a mitzvah. It's the opposite. For some people, davening, even though you're tired, that's the way to go. Know that they're not supposed to be davening now. They really need their sleep and they need it. So I think for these things, a person needs to have a mashpia, a personal mentor, somebody that also practices Yiras Shamayim as a way of life, practices these teachings. So, and it could be a good friend. It doesn't have to be somebody who's anywhere near perfect. Just somebody who has this language, somebody who's not you, that also has this set of values that could just be an outside voice who could help you navigate these decisions. But obviously you're not calling up that person every single minute of the day, you know, but I'm talking about in general, eating the cake and not eating the cake usually boils down to something that happens on a regular basis. So you might not call the person every single minute, every single day, but have these conversations. We should all have these conversations with each other. Everybody needs a mashpia, a person who's not you, who can help you gain awareness about your behavior, because we could very easily convince ourselves, because if we're in our own heads, we could get limited and stuck within our own thinking. But when we're open to other people, we automatically open to ideas and a way of thinking that's bigger than ourselves, especially if the friend knows, the mashpia knows that she's free to challenge us, and we won't be offended, but we'll just respond to the challenge. We'll take her up on the challenge. We'll think about it. We'll reflect on it. We'll analyze it. We'll give it some thought before we just get defensive and push it away. That's one thing. And the other thing is that the signature of the Yetzer Hara is therefore be disempowered. And the signature of the Nefesh Elokis is therefore shine forth with more dignity, courage, and compassion. So if this behavior in this moment is making you stronger in your sense of attachment to Hashem, stronger in your sense of dignity and value, and closer in your relationships, especially in your relationships with the people you live with most closely, and the people who are closest to you in your life, or the people, if you're not living with people, then your closest siblings or closest friends, the people you are most intimately connected with, that's where you want to see yourself feeling more connected, more invigorated, more positive energy flowing into those relationships. If there's more energy, courage, and compassion flowing in your heart, and it's probably you're anchored in your neshama. And if there's less, if there's shame, toxicity, guilt, disempowerment, disconnection, it's probably the Yetzer Hara. And that goes for physical strength and spirit. And if it's physically debilitating, it's not spiritual. If it's to be spiritually whole, we have to be physically whole as well. Okay, so let's summarize today. There is no room for feeling guilt or shame or any hate about having any kind of messy emotions. We have to welcome them, embrace them, pick them up, look at them, deal with them. Hashem made us this way. Every messy emotion is an opportunity for greater attachment, greater awareness, greater connection with our neshama, with Hashem, with our purpose, and ultimately with Mashiach. Hashem made us this way. This is the purpose. This is the design. So if we follow everything we want, if we believe every thought that comes into our head, we will be slaves to very controlling masters. We need to be willing to say, I don't do everything I want. I don't think every thought that pops into my head. I am selective. I am a chooser. And I make choices that are aligned with my deepest self, my pure self, my absolute value, my precious core identity, which is one with Hashem. I do nothing that gets in the way of my attachment with Hashem. And that's the message that we'll go with into the summer. Be'ezras Hashem. I want to wish everyone a safe, healthy, happy summer. It should be a summer of Mashiach. It should be summer of Geula. Of Tisha B'Av should be way, way deep into the third Beis Hamikdash, a real celebration, and the steps towards that should be filled with joy and good health.